start with temperatures well down into single figures, but I suspect we'll see more showers on Wednesday for eastern parts of England. In fact, it could turn out to be quite a wet day across parts of Yorkshire up to southeast Scotland. For Wales and southwest England, not as many showers, and certainly for northwest England, a brighter, drier day. Sunny spells on the west coast of Scotland and for Northern Ireland. Again, though, despite some decent spells of sunshine, temperatures still below average for the time of year. Bye for now.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good evening, friends. I hope you've had a good day. Coming up tonight on Farage with me, Lawrence Fox, as the US threatens catastrophic action if Putin uses nuclear weapons, we'll talk to top brass who served under Ronald Reagan from America and a former British Army commander. We'll get the latest from the Labour Party conference, oh the joy, and the Iranian protests wreaking havoc through London, leaving police officers injured. The rise of the right in Italy, and the cultural heretic Zuby joins me for Talking Pints. First, though, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Lawrence, thank you. The top story tonight on GB News. The Bank of England says it will change interest rates, but by only as much as needed to control inflation. The Bank of England says it's monitoring markets closely after the pound hit a record low. Investors have been reacting to the Chancellor's plan to cut taxes in response to last week's mini-budget. Banks, including Halifax, have temporarily pulled mortgages that come with a fee for customers, and the Treasury has announced Kwasi Kwarteng will now set out a medium-term fiscal strategy in November. Well, the announcement comes after the Shadow Chancellor accused the government of putting the economy in danger, saying the UK is in fact facing a national emergency. Addressing the Labour Party conference in Liverpool earlier on today, Rachel Reeves outlined her priorities and criticised Friday's mini-budget, which she said helped high earners.
Sterling is down. That means higher prices as the costs of imports rise. The cost of government borrowing is up. That means more taxpayers' money will go into paying the interest on our government debt. The Chancellor and Prime Minister, meanwhile, resemble two desperate gamblers in a casino, chasing a losing run. But here's the thing. They're not gambling with their money. They're gambling with yours.
Well, the former England footballer Gary Neville, who's also appeared at the Labour Party conference, says the Chancellor has failed to read the room.
I didn't support the tax cut that was given at the end of last week. I also didn't support the removal on cap for the bankers' bonuses. It was a shock, to be honest with you. I shouldn't be shocked anymore, but I have to say that it didn't feel like it was reading the room in this country, and people are desperately worrying over the winter about how they're going to heat their homes, how they're going to feed their families.
Well, also at conference in Liverpool today, Shadow Levelling Up Secretary Lisa Nandy told GB News that the Labour Party will invest in the many and not the few.
The Tories think that you can grow the economy and build a country by the few, for the few. We think all people and all places have to contribute to the country's success, and all people should have a stake. That's why we're promising to invest to get good jobs, clean energy jobs, back into coastal and industrial towns, so that we can get money back into people's pockets.
Well, defending the government's economic strategy, the Work and Pensions Secretary, Chloe Smith, told GB News growing the economy will take time.
What you saw in the growth package from the Chancellor last Friday is a really bold and ambitious plan that is all about growth, and I think that's exactly right. And for me, in my particular role, what I'm most focused on is using all of those levers to help people into jobs, and that, I think, is what we all want to see.
Well, away from the economy, the US whistleblower Edward Snowden has been granted Russian citizenship. The former intelligence contractor was granted asylum in the country after fleeing the United States in 2013. He's wanted by the American authorities on espionage charges after he leaked classified surveillance information. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time for Lawrence, who's presenting Farage.
Good evening. Between 2016 and 2020, the United States did not become involved in any foreign wars. It became a net exporter of energy and had the highest growth in Black and Latin American employment in history. All this despite enduring unending attempts to undermine the presidency of Donald Trump by the Democratic Party and their minions in the media. Now, like him or not, Trump knew that a world where America stood tall and strong would be a safer world. The way he'd respond to incessant nuclear saber-rattling from North Korea, for example.
We will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for...
He brokered unprecedented peace deals in the Middle East, and before his death of 1 million cuts at the hands of the Mueller report, the Dems and the media, tech censorship and collusion, double impeachment, cities burned to the ground by Antifa mobs, the list goes on and on, Trump held America together in one critical way. He understood the core concept of what keeps this fragile world as stable as it can be: deterrence. Those who will wish America ill were cautious of this impetuous Manhattan millionaire who put America and all its people first. He was proud to be an American, as his rally song blared out at every gathering of the deplorables. You know, those flyover state working class Americans, now called MAGA extremists, the white privileged and white rage-filled little white boys who come home in coffins at double the rate of the rest of the population when called away to serve. Simple-hearted patriots who love their God, their country, and their families. Those simple fools who America's current president goads and mocks whenever his mental acuity permits it. Is it any wonder the US is struggling to recruit the soldiers they need to get them out of trouble? But they do say that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. And so we see today with Biden's, or should I say Obama's, new vision for an America. An America obsessed not with stature and deterrence, but with faddish and ideological pursuit of diversity, equity, and inclusion. An America humbled and humiliated by the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. An America where fuel prices and inflation immiserate the poor and the middle class alike. An America and the West more broadly hurtle smugly towards a frozen misery of net zero. Meanwhile, China fires up a new coal-fired power station at the rate of almost one a week alongside a shiny new solar panel plant next door to sell to their Western buddies, and then they just sit back, crack open a bottle of Tsingtao, smile, and count the money. America and the West in general is more divided inequitable, and exclusionary than ever. America and the West in general is different. The strong America of those 4 years is a place no more. In its place is now Biden's utopia. However, his polling is in the mud, and most commentators, even many on the left, are predicting a red wave come the midterms on November the 8th. Is it any wonder then that Vladimir Putin, struggling against the mightily well-funded resistance of the Ukrainian fighters, watching America surrender to itself in virtuous self-loathing, feels he can threaten the use of nuclear weapons with some confidence that America and a Europe which drinks deep on Russian oil and gas might not have the guts to do anything about it? A terrifying thought for the whole of mankind, or people-kind, as Justin Trudeau calls it. Later in the show, we will head to Italy. Giorgia Meloni, set to become Italy's first right-leaning leader since the Second World War, took to the stage on what the internet and their hack chums in the media were quick to dub a far-right extremist policy platform, promising such evils as an Italy which celebrates Christianity, family, motherhood, individuality, personal responsibility and identity, an Italy which is proud to be itself rather than remain some vassal state bit part player in Germany's great European project. Later, we'll look at whether these are to be the first seeds that are laid down for the next generation. The first green shoots of populism, optimism. Are people growing tired of having their unique and sacred lives broken down into a series of meaningless intersections? As Georgia quoted G.K. Chesterton in her speech, are the swords being drawn to prove that the leaves are green in summer? And finally, here at home, what about our own military? Our own Royal Air Force effectively pausing job offers to those who by no fault of their own happen to emerge from their mother's wombs with pasty white skin. Those who seek to serve our nation in espionage and counter-espionage are free to do so when and only when they have checked their white privilege and become at one with their wokefulness. In this endless diversity dilution, I'm asking you tonight, is Britain capable of deterring those who wish us ill? Farage at gbnews.uk is where you can email me, or the hashtag Farage on GB News. Tonight we'll be discussing whether we are witnessing the beginning of the end of this divisive, destructive, woke power grab and a return to progress rather than progressivism, and whether the West can survive without taking its first steps down the long road to reclaiming deterrence. It is a matter of the gravest importance to us all, and Vladimir Putin is watching. Joining me now is Colonel Richard Kemp, former British Army commander who chaired the Cobra Intelligence Group. Richard, good evening.
Good evening, Lawrence.
Richard, has the British Army been captured by woke ideology?
Well, unfortunately, I think to some extent it has. I think every institution of the government has been overtaken by this, and it has a dominating effect, which is far more than it certainly should do. I mean, of course, you know, the armed forces should be equal opportunities employers. They should welcome diversity. They should, as far as possible, represent the makeup of the country. But it's now gone well beyond that. It's gone to all of the different wokeist actions that you would expect, you know, gender neutrality and gender neutral lavatories and all this sort of thing. And, you know, people being encouraged to use their personal pronouns, which I would have thought would be their rank, which is pretty much gender neutral anyway. But no, I wouldn't say it's had a huge negative impact on fighting effectiveness, but it certainly threatens to do so.
Yes, you wouldn't have thought there would be a huge amount of diversity, equity, inclusion when your job is to kill people. But is this something which is permeating the upper echelons of the army, and is your rank and file squaddy and British soldier at all on side with this sort of ideology?
Well, I don't think they're on side with it. They have to follow it, of course. You know, the armed forces above all are a disciplined organisation which do what they're told to do, so they have to go along with it. And they have to be seen to go along with it. But I think, yes, it comes really from the top, not everyone at the top, but many people at the top, many senior officers, generals, admirals, air marshals, are even more politically correct than the politicians in their desperation to get promotion and then to move on to the next sinecure they get after leaving the forces, and their knighthoods and their lordships and the rest of it. Now, I stress that doesn't apply to everyone. I know some very good, very senior people who doesn't apply to, but even they have to pay lip service to it, or they wouldn't be still in their job.
For our enemies to fear us, we need to have this concept of deterrence. So this whole ideology really undermines deterrence. And as a nuclear power, Britain itself, how would you say, with your experience, what the value of deterrence is in the military environment?
Yeah, I think wokeism definitely undermines deterrence. Probably it undermines the deterrent effect of the armed forces more than it actually undermines their combat effectiveness. And you can imagine people in our enemy capitals around the world chuckling away at all of the woke policies that are being imposed on us. And deterrence is equally as important as fighting capability. If you haven't got the fighting capability, you haven't got the deterrence, and you've got to be taken seriously. You've got to be seen to be taken seriously. And I think what's going on in Ukraine now, and Putin's threats that you touched on of nuclear attack, that is a result of a failure of deterrence. And that failure of deterrence stems from a number of things, from a broad weakness in Europe as a whole and in the United States of America certainly in the last year or so. And it also the events like the catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan, the French departure from Mali this year, all of these things where we've invested vast amounts of military resources and been seen to fail in doing so. And when it's really important that not Putin particularly, because I think Putin is beyond deterrence. I think he's in a stage now where nothing will deter him. But those other people, let's say in the nuclear chain of command in Russia, who need to be deterred, who need to be afraid to follow his orders if he decides to order a nuclear strike, those people are the ones that have to be deterred. And I hope the White House said they sent private, clear messages about the catastrophic consequences for Russia if Russia launched a nuclear attack. Well, I only hope they were strong messages, and I only hope they were taken seriously, because I don't think many senior people in the Kremlin and the armed forces really do take the US Biden administration, or indeed NATO, particularly seriously. They seem as toothless, spineless organizations that have set themselves objectives and then failed to achieve them. And I think that applies in both the cases of, in the case of Europe as a whole, in the case of NATO, and in the case of the United States. And that is an extremely dangerous situation to be in.
Well, we've had it before, haven't we, with Obama talking about red lines that can't be crossed, and those red lines were crossed and America did nothing. One senses that, as far as I can gather, I'm no military expert, but what we're talking about here are tactical nuclear weapons used over the battlefield or over the Black Sea. What would be the result? What would be the ramifications of no response? Would America respond with a tactical nuclear weapon of their own, or would they respond more firmly? Or would they not respond at all, would be your guess?
I think the only options, really, the only military options in response to the use of tactical nuclear or strategic nuclear weapons by Russia is a strike on Russia itself, severe strike, whether it's nuclear or whether it's not. We have some very potent weapons, or the Americans do, have some very potent weapons which don't necessarily require nuclear and can wreak devastation where they're needed, or indeed the engagement, the military engagement of NATO in Ukraine. One of those two things, or both, are the only viable options, I think. Whether America is willing to take them, whether Europe is willing to take them as well, is very much an open question. I have my doubts, but I certainly hope that we can persuade the Russians that we would be willing to take them. I hope the Americans are able to persuade the Russian command structure of that, because otherwise there's nothing really to stop Putin from doing anything he wants in Ukraine, or for that matter anywhere else.
Couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely terrifying times, and let's hope that people get on top of this as soon as possible. Colonel Richard Kemp there, former British Army commander who chaired the Cobra Intelligence Group. Now, joining me now is former Acting Secretary of the US Air Force during Ronald Reagan's presidency, Tidal W. McCoy in Virginia. Tidal, good evening.
Good evening, Lawrence. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Is Putin for real when he threatens the West with nuclear weapons?
I think that he is real. He's gotten a strategic nuclear doctrine that's been developed over many years in Russia that talks about escalating to de-escalate, which means making kind of a sharp upward break, using potentially a tactical nuclear weapon to demonstrate willpower, and then scaring the other side into a negotiation. That's something that they have convinced themselves and written about. Whether they actually believe it can be done after witnessing the Western response and support for Ukraine, they may have some doubt about that now, and that would be contrary to a lot that they have written and that some have been indoctrinated into believing. Yet we have to consider that may take place, and we have to have some thinking and preparations as to what we would do to try and contain further escalation of that type without it leading to a larger scale nuclear war.
Why is America not encouraging Ukraine and Russia publicly to the negotiating table instead of having this wild rhetoric expand and expand through the world?
Well, it's been a little bit unusual in that it comes on the heels of the rather tragic and devastating pullout from Afghanistan, and I think the reaction to that, particularly when you look at the electoral calendar with the 2022 elections coming up, there may have been a sense that there was a requirement to talk tough, and perhaps talk tougher than you're willing to act, and that one thing led to another, and that the United States felt like it had to show that it was still the leader of the NATO alliance. And one thing has led to another. President Zelensky has become a very good spokesman and a good persuader, and all of a sudden we find ourselves potentially in doing more than we would have planned on doing, because each leader in the Western coalition doesn't want to seem to be flinching at the sight of the Russian forces. And so there's a little bit of one-upsmanship going on, and it's being encouraged by people who like uncertainty, conflict, and control. Sometimes people think that if they're a wartime president, that perhaps that makes them look like a stronger president and attracts more support, more votes, more credibility. And so that is something that we in the West have to realize and be very careful about, and not be drawn continually into escalatory steps.
I don't think we should gamble the state of the whole of mankind on the American midterms. Thank you, Tyler McCoy, former acting secretary for the US Air Force during Ronald Reagan's presidency. Coming up, we will look at the rise of the right in Italy and get an update from day 2 of the Labour conference, oh joy, and the protests in London over the killing of Mahsa Amini in Iran.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. Before the break, I asked you, has the West lost its deterrence? As America tells Putin it will take catastrophic action if the Russian ruler uses nuclear weapons. Yeah, we've heard that before. And you've been getting in touch. Sean says it has since Joe Biden came in. Another says, many Western political systems have been infiltrated by woke mass immigration supporting globalists. Okay. Daryl says the West has lost its deterrence when it's lost its backbone, which was in about 2006. I wonder why you think 2006, Darren, but yes, I certainly think we've lost our backbone. The West has lost its way, Stephen says. I couldn't agree with you more. We must stand up for these values that others have fought and died for. Another viewer says, no one fears us anymore. Putin must be laughing away. I certainly think he is. I certainly think that America looks slightly like a joke at the moment. Earlier today, the Bank of England said it will not hesitate to change interest rates by as much as is needed. Ooh. The pound took a pounding on the first day the world's economic markets opened since Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng's tax-cutting fiscal statement on Friday. The pound recovered to stand at 1.09 US dollars on Monday afternoon, having earlier hit a brief and all-time record low of 1.03. To explain better than I ever could is GB News economics editor and business editor, mega brain Liam Halligan, who is in Liverpool and joins me now. Liam, how are you?
Very well, Lawrence. Nice to be with you.
Talk me through it, Liam. What's going on?
Well, I must say we've had a speech from Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves today. Lots of other things going on at the Labour conference, but the whole conference has been dominated by the currency markets, the sense that the pound is going into a crisis. Actually, the pound went from about $1.09 to $1.09 to 1.03, as you said, on overnight markets. Since then, it's recovered, but it's only recovered, Lawrence, after a statement from the Bank of England reiterating it was prepared to raise interest rates as much as it needed to rein in inflation, and also a statement from the Treasury saying that Kwasi Kwarteng, the new Chancellor, will make efforts to explain his fiscal strategy and lay out how those tax cuts are going to work in terms of keeping the public finances on track. But he said that he wouldn't do that until the 23rd of November, Lawrence. So the Treasury's trying to convey it isn't spooked by these currency movements. I have to say, there are concerns. If the pound falls, then all our imports are more expensive, particularly our imports of energy and oil. We import a lot of oil, which is priced in dollars. So these aren't just parlour games and movements on financial markets that are distant. If the pound actually plunges and goes below $1 to £1, that will inject inflation into the UK economy. That will tighten this cost of living squeeze for all of us here in the UK.
I obviously, as I said to you, I was in Maths Set 8. I have no idea. But you were telling me the other day that it was looking good, what Kwasi Kwarteng's done. But if England has no, we are not the reserve currency, anything could happen. Is that possible?
I think the initial market reaction to Kwasi Kwarteng's tax cuts was pretty positive. And then sentiment changed over the weekend as the currency markets traders delved into the detail. But be in absolutely no doubt, there's a battle going on here, a kind of ideological battle about what the future of the UK economy is going to be. You've got a new Prime Minister, a new Chancellor. They want to move to a lower tax economy, which they think will grow faster with less regulation. And then you've got other people, a more kind of establishment, some would call it a Treasury view, who think moving onto that higher growth path is reckless and takes too many risks with our public finances. It may be that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor can get through this. It may be that the pound stabilises. Certainly they haven't done an emergency rate rise today, which a lot of currency traders were calling for. That emergency rate rise would mean that there's more reasons to buy sterling. You get a better return on sterling, but that may yet happen. All that is in the balance. What I would say, Lawrence, is when you look at the financial markets, they're now priced in much higher interest rates going forward than there were just a few days ago. The Bank of England's main interest rate is currently at 2.25%, 2.25%. But the financial markets are pricing in that same Bank of England base rate around 6% by the middle of next year. If you took out a mortgage when interest rates were very, very low, as they were until just a few months ago, and then you have to remortgage because the fixed rate comes to an end at 6%, that's going to cause a lot of problems for a lot of ordinary people. And that's another reason why we all have to keep an eye on what's happening on these financial markets, these currency markets, because unless the government can stabilise the situation, then that will impose a lot of pain, unfortunately, on a lot of ordinary households.
So, uncertain times ahead. You'd really cheered me up last week, and now I'm back into the doldrums. Thanks, Liam Halligan, very much. Now, Giorgia Meloni is set to become Italy's first female prime minister, as her party, Brothers of Italy, are to receive 26% of the vote share, an increase of nearly 22%, with their slogan, God, Homeland and Family. Oh. There is no surprise that Ursula von der Leyen is already getting her knickers in a twist about how the European Union may react. The coalition will form the first right-wing Italian government since the Second World War, with Meloni stating yesterday that the biggest ambition we have in life is for Italians to be proud again of being Italian, unfurling the tricolour flag. Well, that sounds like far-right extremism to me. Anyway, joining me from Milan is Alessandra Bocchi, a journalist at Italian newspaper Il Giornale. Alessandra, what has sparked this change of course in your country?
Well, there's really been disillusionment with how the pandemic was managed. We had very strict lockdown restrictions. And also, there's been, before the pandemic, a problem with mass immigration. So these two factors put together made Meloni the most sort of likely candidate to win this election.
The massive draconian measures played a huge part in this sudden lurch to the freedom side of the argument, rather than what one would call the right.
Yes, there is a freedom side to the argument. However, she does represent the most right-wing government since the end of the Second World War, so that cannot be ignored. And her sentiments on patriotism, on the defense of national identity, of your cultural identity, of your family identity, are really resonating at a time when those concepts are considered unacceptable, let's say.
And how do you think that will affect Italy's relationship with the EU?
Well, von der Leyen already said that she's ready for retaliations if Meloni wins this election. However, the EU doesn't really have much choice. I mean, with Poland and Hungary and now Italy disagreeing with their main, let's say, policy towards the member states, they have to accommodate their views. So there is chance for reform in the EU, possibly.
And is there what's the feeling on the streets in Italy? Optimism or trepidation?
I would say there is optimism. However, it's important to take note of the fact that she won with 26%, which isn't really that much. But she did win an overall right-wing coalition with 46%. So there is optimism, and the people I spoke to are happy that there's a likelihood of things finally possibly changing in the future.
Go well, thank you very much. Alessandra Bocchi there, journalist for Il Giornale. Now, the Labour Party are finishing off the second day of their annual party conference in Liverpool, with the day centring around the economy. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves delivered her keynote speech to delegates, pledging to reverse the Tories' cut to the top of the income tax rate and a promising government on your side. Joining me from Liverpool for a roundup of today's events is our political editor, Darren McAfee. Good evening, Darren.
Hello, Lawrence. Hi, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How did the day go? Labour just said they do the exact opposite of the Tories. Is that correct? Am I getting it right?
Yeah, essentially, that is the bottom line. And in many ways, that's essentially what the party needs to do, in the sense that they need to set out a narrative. We're, 18 months, 2 years out from a general election. There's been a bit of criticism today that they've not really fleshed out any policy detail. Yes, we heard from Rachel Reeves that she would restore the top rate of tax at 45%. She'd set up this new wealth fund as well, though keeping the cut at the bottom rate of tax. But in the end, what Labour want and need to do at this conference is put a lot of blue water, a lot of ideological water between them and the Conservative Party, so the voters frankly have a choice at the next election. And at the moment they feel that they're doing that pretty well. I mean, it is extraordinary. I've been coming to Labour Party conference for years and years and years, and you know what, most of the time they've been quite depressed about either being out of government or necessarily having Jeremy Corbyn as leader, whatever it was. At the moment, the words you hear time and again are hope, are confidence, an expectation almost that they're in a pretty good place for a good shot at the next general election. Now, that's not to say they've still got a massive uphill struggle. Yes, they're ahead in the polls, but they need a massive swing if they want to have a good shot at ending up in government in 2024. But there is a sense Keir Starmer, he's going to deliver his keynote speech tomorrow, is setting out to say this key division with the Conservative Party. Their argument, of course, here in Liverpool is that they are the party for low and middle income earners. The government have clearly shown, they would argue over the last couple of days, that they're the party of high earners and the very, very wealthy. And they think that is a message that is going to resonate with the general public. We heard from Rachel Reeves today. We heard from Gary Neville today. The key moment will be when we hear from the Labour leader tomorrow afternoon.
Darren McCaffrey, thank you very much. My what the fox moment today, a story that in my opinion hasn't had enough coverage in the mainstream news. Hundreds of demonstrators angered at the death of a young woman in Iran after she was arrested by the morality police marched on the embassy in London, demanding an end to the regime in Tehran. Scotland Yard has warned that it will not tolerate a repeat of the violence outside the Iranian embassy in London yesterday, which left 5 police officers with serious injuries, including broken bones. Now, with the likelihood of further protests, police say that they'll have additional resources on duty to deal with any violent disorder. Our Home and Affairs Secretary, Editor Mark White, reports.
Over several hours and in multiple locations, police had to contend with serious violence. Much of the disorder was, according to Scotland Yard, clearly orchestrated. Groups of protesters set on confrontation. From a noisy and impassioned rally in Trafalgar Square, by the time they reached the Iranian embassy, their anger spilled over into violence, turning on the police lines time and again as they were prevented from reaching the embassy building. It was the death of a 22-year-old Iranian woman that sparked protests across Iran, which have now spread to several other countries around the globe. Masha Amini died in custody after being arrested by the morality police for failing to properly cover her hair. The protesters want to see an end to the Iranian regime, in power since the Islamic Revolution in 1979. Outside the Iranian embassy in London, a clean-up operation is underway to repair smashed windows and remove paint from the front of the building. London Mayor Sadiq Khan blamed a minority for hijacking a peaceful demonstration. Scotland Yard said it was examining CCTV, video and mobile phone footage to try to identify those responsible for the violence. The Metropolitan Police said it would always try to facilitate peaceful protest, but violence will not be tolerated. With the likelihood of more protests in the days ahead, police will have additional resources on duty to deal with any further outbreaks of disorder. Mark White, GB News.
And we're receiving news that there have been further protests today. Now, joining me now is human rights activist Yasmin Mohammed. Good evening, Yasmin.
Good evening, Lawrence. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Could I ask you why these protests began and why they are taking place in Britain as well as Iran? And are there any taking place where you are based?
Yes, there are taking place where I am based. There are protests in New York, all over Canada, all over the States, all over Europe, usually in front of the Iranian embassy. And of course, the major protests are taking place in Iran. So these protests are taking place as a direct result of the brutal death of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old girl who was beaten to death until she was brain dead because of a few strands of hair were showing. So according to the Iranian morality police, she deserved to die for that crime. So they are not only protesting against the morality police, though. This is important to note. They're protesting against the Islamic regime in general. The Iranian people have had enough of this Islamic regime that has been subjugating women and has just been demoralizing the country in so many ways. And so they're fighting back, and they're fighting back really hard. What happened in Britain, unfortunately, as you know, the few times that I agree with Sadiq Khan, I'm sure that it was a few people who probably agree with the Iranian regime and probably support the Islamic regime. And so they went there to the embassy to cause trouble, to make it look like the Iranians were the ones who were not peacefully protesting, when in fact they've been peacefully protesting all over the world without issue.
This idea of morality police, so I'm assuming that there are two separate strands to the police. You have the religious police and then you have the standard, traffic cops, or you will. What is the makeup of the morality police? Where do they come from? A religious background or?
Yeah, so the regime, the Islamic regime of Iran, is a Sharia country. So that means it's based on Islamic law. So it's a theocracy. Their laws are religious laws. So it comes from the religion. And the morality or the religious police, their job is to go around and make sure that people are following Islam properly. And the thing that they focus most on is women. Or not the thing, but the people that they focus most on are women. And the thing that they focus most on is the hijab. And women have been imprisoned over hijab. Their lawyers have been imprisoned over hijab. Women have been killed over hijab. Women have been attacked with acid over hijab. This has been an ongoing issue for a very long time, and Iranians have just had enough.
Difficult to have much confidence in your religion if you need an entire police force to make sure it's adhered to. Anyway, thank you very much, Yasmin Mohammed. Right, so up next, the GB News Tavern will be open after quite a serious evening, and I will share a pint with rapper and podcaster Zuby. See you after the break.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales,
and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio,
and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Praise the Lord, the GB News pub is open, unlike most of the other pubs will be by the end of the year. And joining me is rapper, podcaster and women's deadlift record holder, Zuby. But before I speak about him, about what he does best, I'd like to show you what he does for a living.
Oh, you don't like my style? Okay, dude. Oh, you don't like my lyrics? Okay, dude. Oh, you don't like my politics? Okay, dude. Do you even know what knowledge is? Okay, dude. Oh, now they want to mention me.
Cheers, dude.
Cheers, man. Good to see you.
How are you doing?
Blessed and highly favored as always.
So listen, I came across you after the deadlift, which was I think everyone came across you after the deadlift. But you then, I watched how you sort of built a life from what you were doing. I mean, you've been doing it all and you're always motivating other people to do it. I sense inside of you, you've been very outspoken on vaccinations, you've been very outspoken on bodily autonomy, you've been very outspoken on, not outspoken, logical and sensible about all of this stuff. Where do your principles and your views and your standpoints come from?
Man, that's always a difficult one to answer, I think, for anybody. I guess it's a combination of my personality, my upbringing, my experiences, the way my brain works and the way that I view the world. I have a really diverse background. I was born in the UK, grew up in Saudi Arabia, went to an international school there, essentially an American school for several years. Came back to the UK, went to school here for a while, went to university here. My family background's originally from Nigeria, and on top of that, I've traveled to about 38 different countries now. I spent a lot of time in the US. I've got a big audience over there. I'll be heading out to Australia soon, in fact, as well. So I just try to make sense of the world, and I'm someone who's naturally intellectually curious. So I think that my beliefs and perspectives stem from a combination of that.
Yeah, and you encourage people to get jacksinated rather than vaccinated necessarily. I really like it. So you say you went to school in Saudi Arabia. What was that like?
Yeah, sure. So I was in Saudi Arabia, where I lived was kind of like an expat bubble. So there's sort of two sides of it. If you live in a Gulf country as an expat, they have small towns. They're called camps where primarily expats live, so you've got those small little bubbles, and then outside
safe
spaces, yeah, and then outside of that, they've got the real cities. So you get to see both sides. But I lived there from the age of 1, pretty much. So that's where all my earliest memories are. I was there in school from the age of 5 up until 11. So I was in the American school system, kindergarten to 5th grade, and then essentially after 5th grade, I went to boarding school here in the UK, and yeah, I studied here for another 7 years, and then I did well in school, got into Oxford University, studied computer science there, graduated. It's also where my music career started. I released my first album when I was still studying at Oxford, and I went full-time with my music in 2011. And for the past 11 years, I have been carving a name for myself initially just through music, but then that expanded into realms of social media and social cultural commentary. Started my podcast in 2019, wrote and released my first book, Strong Advice, Zuby's Guide to Fitness for Everybody then. Had my first appearance on Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro, lots of big US podcasts and shows. And over the past 3.5 years, my audience and reach has just exploded all over the world.
What I really admire about you is you seem to do it single-handedly, and you will not stop at anybody else. You're not relying on anybody else to deliver. Like, I've got a thing on there that tells me what to say. But you know, and I watch your, like, I don't know if you still do it because you're probably too big now, but you would do these little auctions online. You'd be going like, I've got 50 books to sell, buy that, and there's now, and they get more expensive, the less you do it. And you've essentially made a real you're a true entrepreneur in the oldest sense of the word, and it's such an admirable thing. And where do you think that work ethic comes from? Is it a family thing? Is it a mum-dad thing? Or, you know, what are your views on the family, for example?
Man, what are my views on the family? Man, family is
we need them?
Bedrock. Family is the bedrock and cornerstone of a society. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm a big champion for individual rights and self-determination and independent thinking, independent action, critical thought. But no man is an island. We all come from a family and a long lineage, whether we like and appreciate that or not. But family is the cornerstone and bedrock of a country, of a community, a town, a city, a nation. Yes, it's made up of individuals, but that family dynamic and unit is extraordinarily important. And when it is not intact or when there are problems there, it leads to wider problems in a society and wider problems in a nation. So I'm very pro-family, which sounds like a weird sort of thing to say. I think that everyone should be pro-family. It sounds like a sort of default position. But I think that in this strange and turbulent time where everything is controversial and everything is up for debate, even very, very basic things, I think perhaps it's important to reiterate the fact that family is incredibly important. And I'm very, very blessed to come from a great family and have wonderful parents and wonderful siblings. And that's truly a blessing. I think that's the biggest privilege one can really have.
That's such a good, I believe the same. Do you think that, what do you make of the Italian elections? Are you political at all? Do you care about politics?
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of people view me through a very political lens.
Do they? What political?
A lot of people do. I'm not really into party politics per se. I'm more interested in big ideas. I'm very interested in humanity as a whole and what makes us think and behave the way that we do. It's part of why I love traveling to different cities and different countries, experiencing different cultures, talking to such a range of people, whether interviews like this or through my own podcast and other people's, because that's how we really get to learn about the world. People have all sorts of different beliefs and perspectives. We've got about 8 billion people in this world, and there's no two of them who believe the exact same thing on every issue. And I think that that is interesting. We've got such a range of personalities, experiences, talents, ways of thinking, perspectives, and I honestly think that we can all learn from each other. I think one of the biggest concerns I have with the way some things seem to be going in the West is that conversation and thinking themselves are often being discouraged. There's just a set narrative and a very narrow range of views that are considered acceptable. And anyone who goes outside of that or who questions it or challenges it or even sometimes wants to have a conversation, right? There'll be someone right now on the internet who's mad that we are sitting here talking to each other. And to me, that's insane. I think we need more conversations, not less.
Why do you think we've stopped talking to each other? Or, I don't think about it in terms of talking. I think about it in terms of listening. My mother, God rest her soul, always used to say to me, draw people out, draw people out, draw people out, find out what they think. And then from that minute that you start to engage with them lovingly, even people that don't necessarily love you back, you start to find out a bit about them. So rather than when did we stop talking to each other, when did we stop listening to each other? And why, and what's going to happen?
Man, I think there's a lot of factors to it. I think the internet and social media is a factor. I don't think it's all of it. I think that attention spans have shrunk down. And one thing about the internet and social media is people see one another as caricatures. When you're on Twitter or Instagram or these other platforms, it's easy to forget that there are other human beings on the other side, assuming it's not a bot that you're talking to. And when people are reduced to a tiny little avatar and a bio and a couple opinions that you can see, it actually causes conversations to happen backwards. And then with people flicking through all the time, there's just very short attention spans. And I think some of it comes down to what I'd call intellectual laziness. I think that it's difficult to view people as individuals. It's easier to just have boxes that you can put people in, and people like to have boxes and labels that they can just put on people, because once you put a label on someone, you don't need to view them as an individual anymore. You don't need to know them. You can just hear one thing they say or see one aspect about them, visible or not, and you already have your prejudgments about that box. So once you put someone in that box, whether it's, okay, I think this about liberals, I think this about conservatives, I think this about religious people, I think this about atheists, I think this about people who vote this way, people who vote that way, I think this about white people, I think this about black people. And you see oftentimes people doing performing this intellectual laziness, right? So rather than really
it's easier to be virtuous than to actually do something about anything.
It is. I think it's just, I think it's just quicker and easier for people. I think people don't like to use their brains and use that intellectual energy more than is necessary, which is understandable to a degree because we live in a really complex world. We live in an extraordinarily complex world. Our eyes can only focus in one place at one time. We can only hear one conversation properly at one time and so on. So if you're moving around and you're seeing thousands and thousands of people all the time and you're just trying to focus on what's important, we have certain pattern recognition and heuristics, and you can navigate the world just by thinking, okay, I think this about this. It's a simplification way. But I think that when you apply that to individual human beings, then that's a problem. And I think that's where true types of bigotry actually, if you think about it, that's really where they stem from, right? That's where racism stems from, sexism. This is when you just take a huge category of people and you just say, okay, I think this about this group, and I don't need to do any more work. It's very lazy.
It's the laziest way of thinking, and we need to encourage better thinking. My friend, so great to meet you finally.
Likewise.
Right, it is that time of the show where you get to give me a bit of a grilling. Zuby is going to help me answer some of these questions, thank God. Right, so Andrew's asking, who was the worst Home Secretary, Theresa May or Priti Patel?
I don't know.
He doesn't know, so you're going to leave it to me. I would say Theresa May, because she invented the College of Policing, which is a disaster area. Right, a next viewer asks, a takeaway and a beer at home or a bottle of champagne and a fancy dinner out? Look, I've got a few quid, and I couldn't even go and have a bottle of champagne and whatever the other thing was out at the moment. I'm terrified of this inflationary hike and price hikes. I think everyone should be scared, and we should all fight for the most vulnerable in society over this issue. Right, AD, sorry, that was boring. Do you think that Biden and the Democrats will be able to deter the Chinese threat to Taiwan? Zuby?
Wow, we're getting hit with the big, heavy political questions.
No is my answer.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think Biden is looking strong or formidable in any way.
Why is he in charge?
Man, that's a deep one. How conspiratorial do we want to be?
Pretty. We've got a pub. Okay, we don't have time. That's what they say in my ear. Right, following a rise in dog attacks in the last few months, is it time for the Dangerous Dogs Act to be strengthened? No, Bob, it's not time for the Dangerous Dogs Act to be strengthened. It's time for dangerous dogs to be removed from the world, totally. We don't need them. Are you surprised to see the Labour Party arguing for fiscal responsibility when their track record in that respect is abysmal? I'm surprised the Labour Party still exists. The end. That's me, I'm done. Coming up next, it's Mark Stein. Mark, what have you got for us?
Oh, that was such a definitive end you did there, Lawrence. I don't know that I can follow it. That was spectacular stuff with you and Zuby. We're going to try and keep it going. We have David Starkey. I'm going to try and get him to do the Zuby OK Dude song a little later. We'll also have some more on that Italian election, the far right, or maybe even the far right. It's getting worse with every minute. That's all coming up right after the weather.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A bit of a chilly breeze again tomorrow. And again, a mixture of sunshine and showers, but some places seeing a lot of showers. Some places not seeing any at all and seeing sunny spells. But everywhere it'll be chilly again because low pressure up to the north is drawing down this cold air from the north. Hence why it's felt so chilly today, particularly in that stiff breeze, which will continue to throw showers into northern Scotland, some heavy ones here overnight. A few showers keeping going across north and west Wales, northern parts of Northern Ireland, one or two grazing into East Anglia also. But I suspect much of eastern England will stay dry and with clear spells. Temperatures are going to fall away. That breeze stopping temperatures getting too close to freezing, but still well down into single digits. More showers to come on Tuesday for northwest England. Quite a wet day, I suspect, here. And at times those showers will filter down into the Midlands. We'll keep showers going over northern Scotland throughout as well. And by the afternoon, one or two for East Anglia in the southeast. Also by then, thicker cloud for Devon and Cornwall. Could be quite a wet afternoon for much of Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. Going to be another chilly one. Temperatures only in the mid-teens for many and feeling cooler with the breeze. Although the winds tomorrow will be a little bit lighter for most